Hey everybody, welcome. We have a great show for you today. Fabiana Fondevila is joining me here today on the show, and I'm going to tell you all about her in a minute because where wonder lives. I used to say, where the heck is wonder? How is everybody experiences great life? Everybody's in awe. Everybody's happy. And they used to say to me, dang, aren't you Pollyanna Patty? Today, we're going to talk about what are the practices for all of us to cultivate the sacred in our lives. And there is a reason for this. There's a reason to talk about this. I'm going to introduce Fabiana in 1 minute in an honorable and detailed way because there's quite a bit you should know about who she is. But before I do, I need to say hi to both of my producers, Jacob and Benny. How y'all doing today?
I'm good, Pat.
Doing very well today.
All right. Um, we got a great show. We got a great week lined up for all of
Mhm.
you. It is. It is just like it's like a thing. And so look, Benny, Jacob. Here's the thing. So we're going through a little bit of a renaming, but it's not really a renaming. It's just sort of a reframing of the renaming. So we've been known by our first channel. Of course, the Dr. Pat Show is the Dr. Pat Show, but the Dr. Pat Show has always been, part of the Transformation Network, right? But the Transformation Network has never been fully articulated to the public. So this morning, I'm having a really fun conversation. And there's an energy of this. And that's what I want to talk to Fabiana about today. There's an energy. And so all of our hosts, we went out, we asked everybody, as we're launching the new channels, the new technology, we asked people. And what we found was that the Transformation Network and Transformation Talk Radio are always referred to as an acronym. So when people talk to me, they rarely say Dr. Pat. If they know me, it's DRP. Nobody knows my last name. So that is not a brand we're even going to even talk about. But when you're looking at a network that people know, how do we have the energy of what Fabiana is talking about? How do we have the energy? So when people get the sense of the network and what we're doing, they get a sense of maybe wonder lives here too. Maybe it does. So it's fascinating to find out that we on our staff are probably the only people that don't refer to us as TTN, the Transformation Network. So it's a whole interesting idea about how do you decide what you want the world to know about you? How do we want the world to refer to you? But when you look outside of the energy of this sacredness of what you're creating, you may get an answer that just does not fit at all. Today, if you're wondering, how do you captivate the energy of that sacred space? How do you find where wonder lives? And I will tell you that that little tidbit I shared with you about the network, we came back to this place that Fabiana talks about, where it doesn't really much matter what the marketing people say, yes, it does matter what they say. That doesn't matter as much as what do you feel? What do our listeners feel? What do people out in the world sense of things? All of that. That's what's most important. And so today, I want to introduce you to somebody that understands and can map your inner landscape. Because if it ain't within, it ain't going to be without. It's just not going to be that way. That misalignment will cause you pain. Pain. Fabiana, it's great to have you here today. Did I butcher your last name or did I get it pretty okay?
No, you got it very, very right. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
You notice
And
I
thank you
didn't
for giving
pronounce
me time.
I you notice I didn't
That's a
pronounce
long
the
one and a hard
yeah. Look, I wanted to set the stage for this because this show has always been about real life things. Always been about it.
one.
I am not your typical radio host. I didn't start like that. I dialed the wrong phone number, but the minute I got behind a mic, Benny will tell you, he's been with me 17 years. It was like coming home. But the times in my life where things have been, let's say, in a state of friction,
Hmm.
have been out of the space you talk about, right? Have been from a misalignment. And I want to ask you, you must have been through a lifetime of stuff to write a book like this. It's a brilliant book, by the way. I
Thank
got to
you.
ask you this. After everything you've done, who you are, what are some of the challenges and obstacles you had to overcome to bring you right here today, right now?
Well, that's a great question. Um, I think one of the main obstacles was my very strong scientific background, because my mom was a doctor, and my family was very intellectual and academic. And even though my book is not non-academic, because as you've seen, I'm quoting all kinds of thinkers and many scientists, in fact, but still the idea of wonder from a more academic point of view, at least until very recently, because it's now being studied, I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, seems kind of like a lighthearted and kind of I wouldn't say woo woo, but a little bit like a not a serious enough pursuit for somebody that, like I was, spent most of my life in journalism, covering even wars and politics and hard news. It is a long road from there, a long deviation, as you say, of yourself. But so it's been a long road, and I did have to fight my own prejudice and my own fears of how this would be perceived. But that long road helped make it happen, because in between there was a lot of experiencing and a lot of meeting people. I started giving workshops when I left the paper and working with people and people's experiences. And I realized that this is where it's at for me. And these kinds of very daily, in a way, mundane experiences, but seen from the eyes, with the eyes of the heart, with an open-hearted and open-minded attitude. um, I think for me, this is where life becomes most interesting. So I've really stopped fighting myself on that.
Yeah.
And from then on, it's been a very smooth ride, I would say.
Well, I was looking at this. I mean, you're a writer, you're a speaker, you're a ritual maker, you're much more than that. You're a teacher. You're also the author of at least a dozen children's books. When I thought about the world and what you've learned and what you've created, especially as you took these topics on as a journalist and looking for philosophers and mystics and scientists, right? You know, there was a moment, a tipping point where you you saw a need to shift gears. That's the only way I know how to talk about it. You saw a need to sort of flip a switch. I mean, that's the only way I can refer to it in my life. Um, can you pinpoint like a moment where you just had this sense, wait a minute, there's a place that I want to explore, the place of wonder, the place that I
Mm.
want to teach people about, that place where people can feel enthusiastic in what they do. Did you hit that
Mm.
point, or was it more of a slower journey?
It was definitely a journey, but I can pinpoint some specific points in that journey. One important one was becoming a mother, having
Yeah.
two children who are now grown. When they were little, you know how it is when there's children around, that childlike part of ourselves comes alive, and you remember everything forgotten when you're trying so hard to become an adult. So it was a very quick uh, return to a lot of my childhood um, longings and passions, especially regarding nature. We would go out on treasure hunts, and treasure meant picking up a little leaf or a little bug or looking at a cloud. And all of this became stronger and stronger. I started writing, as you said, children's stories for my children initially, and then eventually publishing them. And so this um, dimension of life, which at the same time I was working at the paper, as I say, in international news and very hard-edged and worldly topics, but this was gaining ground slowly in my heart and in my everyday life. So I would live this sort of double life. At the
Yeah.
paper was one thing, and then I would come home, and my fantasy would flourish with my children, and all these unseen worlds bubbled up inside me. So that, I think, that was one of the roads into this change of life.
And
um,
I'm
being a
asking,
mother.
Yeah, I'm asking you that because I usually, when I see somebody and I look at what you've written in this book, right? And I just love, I mean, there's a couple of the things here I want to talk about when we come back from break. Um, but this is a book to give us tools. So, what I love about, the science of things and the research of things, what it does is it points us to a place where we can pinpoint something that somebody can use to make a change. But most people have a sense that wonder is outside of who they are in their lives. They have a sense that, uh, uh, like me, if you grow up in the projects and you grow up in a neighborhood where English is not the first language, and you pick up a little Spanish here and there, but you muddle your way through it, and you have a sense of something optimistically, but you have a hard time as you get older then to realize you could have the life you want. The signs show up.
Mm.
When we come back, we're going to talk about how to make wonder available for everyone. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. It doesn't matter what you've done in your past. But how about wonder? Wonder. What an amazing word. When we come back, we're going to get schooled by my very special guest today, the author of Where Wonder Lives, Practices for Cultivating the Sacred in Your Life. And here's what I want to say before break, Benny. I tried to live a life without the sacred. I tried. I don't know why I tried, but even today, I have to be reminded that if I'm not in that space, if I'm not in the practice of that, man, it is highly unlikely I'm going to experience the wonder. Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. I'm Dr. Pat. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Pat Show. If you want to know more about me, hop over to the Dr. Pat Show, or basically go over to transformationtalkradio.com. Lots of information there. You'll also take a look at when some of the other shows I do are upcoming, especially my Thursday show at 4 o'clock, The Psychic and the Doc. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to somebody who is exciting all of us to step into the reawakening, to step into the place where we can create our personal mythology, where we could take a look at, the hero's journey within each and every one of us, even if it doesn't feel like we have one. But how do we activate all this? How do we move ahead on this? Fabiana, would you please, one, how do people get a copy of the book? How do they find out about you and your work? And then what kinds of things do you have now that you've created so that people can get activated?
Okay, well, the book will be out on February 12th, but it's available for pre-order in Amazon, so you can get it right away. And I assume it'll be in bookstores. That's it. Thank you for having it and showing it. And you can reach me in my website, which is my name, fabianafondevila.com/English, because that's my new website in English. And my Instagram account and Facebook accounts are called Where Wonder Lives, just like my book. And there is one workshop that I'd like to tell you about because it's coming up very shortly. It's on Saturday, this next Saturday. Um, Depending on where you are, you can check out the times in my website. But it's called Activating Enthusiasm, and it has everything to do with what we're going to be talking about. It has to do with what ways we can turn ourselves on for this year, which is such a strange year after what 2020 left behind and what it put us through. And I think it's important that we start out with not with a fresh slate, because obviously we're going to take into account everything that's happened and everything we've learned, but there's no need to disassociate from our vital force. I think we always can tap back into that. And my book is in a great way about specifically that, how to get into that mindset, that heart space.
Yeah. And first of all, Benny, I want to just give you a heads up. We've got 3 copies of this book to give away today. And I want to just give a shout out for Manzanita Carpenter and our friends at Inner Traditions for being so generous about our Pay It Forward program and giving a copy of the book away, Benny. As well as Jacob, you may be getting some people over there on Facebook that might want a copy of the book. Let's go ahead, Benny, and give our first copy away. 1-800-930-2819. Um, so I want to talk to you about this. You heard me talk about our Pay It Forward program. 17 years I've been doing the show. From day one, it was important for me to give things away to people, copies of books. It's an energy of things. It reminds me sometimes of some of the dark places I've come from. I want to talk to you about one of the aspects of your book, but before I dive into it, I found the book interesting in the pathway and your journey that you take us on throughout the book. Everything from awakening our senses, right? As we
Mhm.
come through here to helping us tell a new story. And so, what I love about the way you've written this book is you simply allow us to be who we are when we were that person. Tell me a little bit more about the way that this book is messaging people, what the takeaway is as we go through the book and read it.
Okay, let's see if I can summarize it.
Yeah.
The book is a map. It's an imaginary map of 9 stations. Some of them Pat has been mentioning.
Yeah.
So there's different ways into the sacred that have all personally been important for me. And my hope is that you will find whichever works best for you. All readers will find their way in. In fact, I say at the beginning of the book that you don't have to read it from beginning to end. You can enter wherever the map calls to you. So some people will feel drawn to the rewilding aspect and how we can get not so much back in touch with nature, but back to remembering that we are nature and that nature is in us all the time. There is no way to not be nature. So there's many practices that we can discuss related to that. And then other people might enjoy more to think about their lives from a mountaintop sort of perspective, which is what myths give us, an idea, a way to look at our lives as part of a bigger story, not just, I am such and such a person working this job and have so many children, but what is my life story about? What do I want my life to be about? So that's the mythic entry point. And then there's another station which is called the sacred fire, or I think in English it was the fire,
Yes.
which is about creating your own rituals and ceremonies. And why is ritual important? Why does it still have a place in modern day life, or should it have a place? And how do we go about creating our own rituals? And then there's one about the senses, which has to do with living an embodied life and not forgetting that we have senses that the response that our senses, sorry, I'll start again. My English is a little rusty. That the heart needs to be receptive to what comes in through the senses and not be indifferent to the sights and the sounds and the smells and the touching and all of this that is very much a part of our lives. And we sometimes glide through life forgetting that we're bodies and that these bodies have all these magical qualities. So that's about the senses. And then there's a chapter or station called the swamp, which is a bit more difficult. That's where it gets a little bit hairier,
Yep.
which has to do with exploring our own shadow, working with our shadow. And well, I could go on naming the rest of the stages, but that might be long. I don't know if you like to jump
Well,
in with.
I really wanted you to mention them, and let me go ahead because what I love about about what you've done is a lot of times, I'll get a book and they'll have very, very clear, this is this, this is this. But the way you've written the book is you talk about these stages in real active ways. So, for example, when you talk about the jungle, you talk about rewild yourself, but later on, when you talk about the lighthouse, you're talking about focus your mind. You're talking about mindfulness meditation. And then what I loved is when I got to the end of the book, it was about the ocean, open your heart. And I never expected that to be that. So, what you've done in this book is not only are you talking about the shadow and tell a new story, but the way that you phrase these things, it really does draw us in. And that's why I wanted you to talk about it. Now, a couple of things I want to get to for me. You said Sometimes you'll open the book and you'll go to a page. And I find this interesting, right? Even though I read the books, there are parts of the book that, if, like this morning when I picked it up to talk to you, there was a section of the book I went to today. And I wanted to ask you, as we go through different parts of life, we're at different places. So today for me, yesterday I was latching on to the fire. Today for me, it's as if I went back and I grabbed a part of the book that I know I read, but I went back to the river. I went back to let your imagination flow.
Mm,
This has got to be a significance and importance to you. And I
mhm,
wanted to ask you, where does the energy of that come from? And how do we captivate the times we live in today and our inner self so that we could reignite our
mm,
imagination, right? Do you know what I mean?
mhm. Sure, sure. Because for many people, it's not a time that seems conducive to imagination because
Yeah.
life on the outside has been so challenging and for some people so painful. But at the same time, human beings have distinguished themselves. This has been unique to the human species, that we have this capacity to go beyond our current circumstances. Our minds, and that's, I don't mean our brains, but I mean our minds, are able to travel into the future, into the past, into possible alternative realities, and create that which we want to embody, and that's which we want for ourselves, for the world, for the people in our lives. So cultivating creativity doesn't have to do, creativity is sort of imagination in action. That's the relation between the two. Imagination is in your mind, but when you bring it out into the world in some form, whether it's writing or painting or singing or doing something or dressing differently, that becomes creativity. So it's imagination embodied, so to speak. So creativity is not about, it's not the world of artists as we sometimes think, or people who have extra time on their hands. It's our lifeblood. We need creativity because otherwise life becomes flat and dull and repetitive. But it's a force that, I mean, everything you see looking around us was at some point imagined by somebody before it existed. The tables and the chairs and the books and the ideas, everything was first summoned up in someone's imagination before it could be brought out into the
Yeah.
world. And that's how all of our history has taken place. And we are not different. We're not separate from that current of creativity that is life, that is the universe. We couldn't possibly be, because the universe was not creative in one swift blow and then it's there sitting there like a stone. It's permanently changing and seeking out its new iterations. And we are part of that flow. So we can't help but be creative. It's more a question of how do I tap into it, not how do I find it somewhere outside of myself. It's inside of me all the time. It's just, am I creating what I want to create? That's the question. Or do I want to imagine something else, a different story, a different set of circumstances for myself?
And the reason I brought this up is there were a couple of things that I discovered as I looked at where I am. I had something unexpected come up in my life, and it was really unexpected. It was like left field. It's not like a bad thing, but it was left field. It was, something that for me, when I planned out the year, I had my year planned out where we're going with the network. I'm not a Virgo. So when I say planning, I'm literally talking about the way a Sagittarius would plan, right? But when something unexpected comes up, and let's just say COVID is unexpected and it's still here, but I found out I had to move after 14 years in the same place. And I
Mhm.
just thought, okay, let's go. But the world we're living in now makes finding a new place to live just extraordinary. And I was reading your book this morning and I realized something. I realized that if I would step back and take that one thing and follow some of these stages you have, for example, imagination, or then if you take a look at it, look at a ritual around this that would manifest something in the world of possibilities.
Mhm.
Because the vigilance to do this is you have to do it every day, you have to look every day, you have to reach out to people every day, you have to be quick. But man, if you don't do this, just like any other thing in life, going to your job, parenting, whatever the, if we don't have the energy of these stages,
Mhm.
it's going to be much harder, right, than we thought, right?
Exactly.
So that's what I was struck by in your book. When you put it all together, aren't you literally giving us a way to help us tell new stories every day of our lives for just about everything?
Hmm. That's a good way of putting it. Thank you. Yes, I think that the map is a map of wonders, as the book says, because I do believe that in all these aspects of life, our relationships, we haven't gone into that one. The way we relate to one another, the magic that we can find in our bonds, it's never been clearer than now with the pandemic. We have depended on each other for dear life, even across a Zoom screen. So when we remember that life, yes, life can be hard, it can be challenging, it can be uncertain, but there are places to go to remember who we are and to bring each other home in a very wondrous way, because these are not illusions. We're not talking about something that's, um, what's that expression? Pie in the sky, I think
Pie
it's
in
an
the sky. Yeah.
Right, pie in the sky. It's not something that we're pretending is there. It's really there when we tap into the love that we share. Even people that hardly know each other, even just this moment that we're talking to each other and feeling each other's feelings, because immediately we resonate. And there's something that happens with the heart. You mentioned that the heart is it's kind of the place where it all comes together at the end of the book. You may have heard of the research done by the Heart Math Institute, but we do know today that when two people entrain and are understanding each other and are connecting, our hearts are in training as we speak. And so there's a lot of magic going on undetected, below our awareness, our
Yeah.
every awareness. And when you tap into those places, then you recover a sense of possibility and hope and vitality. That's what I've meant to portray in the book, all the
Yeah.
different pieces that you can go to.
And that's what I mean. They're all different pieces. Benny, let's take a short break. When we come back, we're going to get into a little bit more detail and give you some tools that you could use today. If you're thinking, I'm just sitting here in a conundrum, I've got a quagmire of whatever is going on in my mind. I don't even understand, Pat, what you're talking about, imagination. And then we're talking about the mind. When we come back, how do these two peas in the pod work? Imagination and mind. How do they work? And are they really more significant than knowledge? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's so great to have all of you tune us in, turn us on. I'm talking with Fabiana Fondevila, who's joining me here today. Where Wonder Lives, practices for cultivating the sacred in your daily lives. And we're going to actually do that. And as you know, we had 3 copies of the book to give away, thanks to our friends at Inner Traditions and Manzanita, of course, in scheduling this for us. It is a book for our time, it is a message for our time, but it's also practices that will help us in our everyday lives. And, during the break, Benny, I was talking with Fabiana about my journey in finding a new place to live. And I realized as I went out yesterday, I usually have a ritual around my day, whether it's to use my brain tap machine or to wear this beautiful chicana that Vera Lopez gave me, just beautiful. And I realized yesterday I was so in my left brain with this process that I was totally away from imagination, from flow. And we went out to look at some of these places yesterday, of course, in the rain here, and I didn't have that Chicana on, and something was off for me. So today, when we talk with Fabiana right now, we're going to be reminded of how everything in life that we do can have its own mythology, can have its own imaginative story and journey that's part of our deeper selves. There are ways to quiet our mind. And what happens if peace actually breaks out? Fabiana, one more time, how do people get a copy of the book? How do they find out about you?
Well, you can get a copy on Amazon, pre-order it. It comes out February 12th or in bookstores shortly. And you can find me with my name. My website is my name, Fabiana Fondevila, with just one L.com/English. And you can find me also in social media as Where Wonder Lives, the name of the book, both in Instagram or Facebook. So thank you for that. And would you like me to address what you were just talking about?
Yes, and please just remind everybody about the upcoming workshop that you have about activating enthusiasm, because that is what we're talking about today. You know,
Exactly.
if we don't activate enthusiasm, even if we're looking for a new apartment, right? As heartbreaking as that may be, we're not going to
Mhm.
get the result we want. So you're also doing that workshop, right?
Right, that's on February 6th, next Saturday. You can find that in any of my social media or my website and just sign up. It's a 3-hour workshop, and we're going to be talking about how do we find enthusiasm within us, and instead of where we usually look for it, which is attached to some activity or situation. So yes, that's an important piece of it too. So you were
Okay.
talking, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Take us on this journey of how we can incorporate ritual, imagination into our lives today.
Great. Okay, so as we said, imagination, or maybe I don't know if I said it, but imagination has sometimes been associated with child's play and something that's illusory, that's not real. But really, what imagination is another faculty we have for knowing life, for appreciating life from a different perspective. So there's no need to leave it in our childhood and in, in artistic productions. We need imagination to revision life from a fresh perspective as we walk along. So one way to do this is also tied to the rituals that you mentioned before, is to create a little morning ritual for yourself that works for you. And it's important that it's personal and that it speaks to your heart, because the imagination, just as dream life is also very symbolic, speaks to us in images and symbols. A symbol is something that represents something else. Usually it's something concrete, like an object, like the chicana you mentioned, or an image that represents something that is usually intangible, invisible. And oftentimes it's a value or a desire or love or an emotion. So the reason that we need symbols is because that is the language of the soul, that is the language of the heart. And oftentimes we find those in the world outside. A symbol is not the same as a sign. I just want to point that out, because a sign
Yeah.
is unequivocal. So if you have a red light, that means stop, and that's the same for everyone. And that's the connection between the sign and its meaning. But a symbol is open. So it means different things to different people. And its meaning can even change for you. For example, that chicana might mean something to you today, and maybe in the future it'll be associated with something else. So a symbol is a very rich language that speaks to our souls, that appears in our dreams at night. Dreamwork is a wonderful avenue into an imaginative life and into a a richly mythic life. But going back to the ritual, so you can just decide maybe to have, let's see, there's so many possibilities, but one very simple symbol that I have used on occasion is to have a bowl near your bed, and every morning you dedicate that bowl and what it means, which is all that empty space, all the possibility for that day, which is new and fresh and up to a certain point in your command, and you fill that with water as you consecrate that water, as you dedicate that water to whatever is your intention for that day. May I be of service. May I live in wonder. May I be ignited. May I connect to others in a special way. So you fill it with water and you leave it. You have an altar, you leave it there or in your shelf or near your bed. And that is there as a representation of that day. And at the end of the day, you take that cup, that bowl of water, and if you have earth or a pot or a garden, you throw it in the garden or wherever you want, as you give thanks for the day that's gone by, no matter what's happened, because there's always something that we can give thanks for. The very least, the fact that we're still alive and we have another chance to go at it in the morning. So that's a very symbolic, you don't even have to say anything. As you do this, you just connect to the energy of filling your bowl again with fresh possibilities for your day, and then emptying it out in the end of the day with an expression of gratitude. Maybe it's just a simple symbol. That's one thing you could do, but you can also write. If you tend to write, if you have a diary or a journal, then in the morning you can ask yourself an important uh, uh, powerful question. For example, what do I want this day to be about? How will I fill my heart today? What am I going to dedicate my day to? So you write out maybe like two or three things that come to your mind, intentions for your day. And at the end of the day, maybe the counterpart to this is you give thanks for three things that happened today. And that's called a gratitude journal.
Mm,
The question there, the importance there is that you make them different every day and very specific, very tiny things. They don't need to be, I give thanks for my life, or even I give thanks for my child, but rather I give thanks because my child said hello to me in a very nice way this morning,
right.
or called me, or remember. So specific, tiny things, different every day. That's another beautiful ritual to incorporate into your life, a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
So that way, you sort of bookend your day in what I like to call expansive or essential emotions, which are the emotions closest to the heart. And that sort of sets the tone for your day. No matter what happens, it'll be easier to get back to that mind state and heart opened state if you begun and you end your day regularly that way. That's just one example.
And the reason I love this is because, there's no mistakes, I think, to what, energy, spirit, God, whatever you believe in, whatever that is, all right? There's no mistakes to how things show up. So here we are today. I'm getting ready to do my shows today and plan my day out. Of course, I end Mondays up with physical therapy because I got a new knee. I love my new knee. Everybody says, "Oh my God, you got the new knee. Oh, it must hurt." Blah blah blah. I'm like, dude, I have got a titanium knee that, man, after the first week, it was kicked into gear. But most people look at that and they're like, "Oh, how are you? Oh, are you dying?" I'm like, "No." But getting a hold of your book this morning, we had a meeting this morning, Jessica, myself. So I love what you're talking about, because if I'd have just done a couple of other things like you just shared, especially with water,
Mhm.
I don't know what it is. I grew up as Catholic, Italian Catholic. I then found out we weren't all Italian. We're Italian Latino. So I found that out later in life. My grandfather was born in Brazil. And so I found those things out. So, but every place there was water. And I never understood this. And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you. And I had this flashback from Mama Balala, right? With the water and the water ritual.
Wow.
And now, how does this even make sense? Well, it doesn't make sense sometimes when the heart opens and we remember. But I remember my grandma and the water.
Mhm.
There was always sacred water, she called it. In I don't even know what language she spoke, but sacred water. And it was water. And we did water at different points in time for different things.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, when you were just talking about that, I could
Mhm.
see my grandma and I thought, oh my gosh, why am I not incorporating that one thing? I've got sacred water from everywhere in my house, and I am not doing that.
Well, that's a wonderful synchronicity. And since we're talking about water, another very simple way to incorporate water in your morning ritual is just to bless the first glass of water that you take,
Yeah,
the first drink you take in. Because
yeah,
again, the metaphor is here I am taking in life as when you wake up, in a way, it's a new you facing the day because you don't even know where you've been at night. And yesterday was yesterday and today is new. So to make that visible, that's what a ritual does. It makes the invisible visible. It makes it clear and it lets you do something with it. So you drink that first glass of water and you dedicate it to your day, to the sun, to the rain, to whatever comes to you. And so you place that intention and that water becomes blessed because
yeah.
it's your intention that counts. And you drink it in with that feeling of refreshment and your renewal. So it's very, very simple. It doesn't have to be elaborate in the least. You don't need any special elements, just your heart and your imagination.
What's fascinating about your book, and I know we didn't talk about this, but I did this with your I think you're calling them phases in your book. I couldn't
Mhm.
help but give them a direction. Now, what do I mean by a direction? Okay. So what I mean is I learned rituals of the north, the south, the east, and the west. I was very blessed to get that mentorship. It began in 97. And then I studied with a friend of mine in the Lakota tradition. So I'm really reminded of directions. I'm really reminded of something in the energy of that. And what was fascinating about it, as I was reading your book, I couldn't help, after getting a hit of imagination, I couldn't help go to the chapter or the stage of fire.
Mm.
Now I'm drawn to fire for a lot of reasons. But right now in the world today, and the way you talk about fire, I think is so extraordinary and important. Can you talk about it from your perspective? Because clearly this the work that you've done in this book is so grounded in sacred ceremony, rituals, and ancient principles. I just
Mhm.
couldn't help to go back and read about fire again. So important,
Sure.
isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, I think I begin by talking about, or at some point in that chapter, I talk about the way the life of mankind changed when we were able to conquer, so to speak, fire and to take it around with us and to warm ourselves with it and to use it for our invocations. But fire is very much a symbol for spirit. And at the same time, it's a symbol for our enthusiasm, our passion, our excitement. And it's a very empowering element, as long as we don't let it get out of hand, as long as we control it and we give it a space, ritual space. That's why rituals contain that kind of energy, this very strong and runaway energy in a particular time and space. So we give it a form and a shape. And it's funny how, even though it's such an ancient and ancestral connection that we have to fire, we can recreate it just by lighting a match and lighting a candle. And the power of a single candle or a stick of incense. And we live in mostly in cities nowadays, and we don't have the possibility of having a huge campfire, wonderful as that is. But we can light a candle and stay in the dark and just let that candle inform us and speak to our spirit. And we really don't need more than that to remember that there is one of the qualities of fire that I find fascinating is the fact that, just like love, the more you share it, the more it spreads, the more you have one candle and you light somebody else's fire with somebody else's
Yep.
candle and another, and instead of having less fire, you have more light. So it begets light, so to speak. And so I do think that we, again, rituals tend to go back to these four elements. Nowadays, we know that there are many more elements. It's not just four, but there's something very symbolic
Right.
because it's been around with us for so long, and because it's still in our psyche. They're so essential. So for some reason or another, we always tend to go back to these four elements in our ritual. So we either give, for example, when you're trying to let go of something in that kind of a ritual, you're trying to let go either of, I don't know, an old job, an old
Yep.
identity, an old relationship. One of the things we tend to do is we let things go into water, flowing water, and that brings the message home very clearly to our heart that that is something that is no longer a part of our life. But then another thing we can do is we can burn it or we can bury it. And so we look, these four elements can be combined and they can be used in many ways. But what I'd like to stress is that even though these are very ancestral traditions and principles, we can make them our own. We
Yeah.
can make them new. So one thing I really like to stress in my workshops is that we are creative beings, and in a way we are not different from the ancient tribes that created these rituals. We are all coming from the same place. We are all drinking from the same deep well. So we can create our own rituals, and they're just as valid. We're all indigenous because we're all indigenous to the earth, which is our home. So even if we have several generations of city dwellers behind us, that doesn't mean that we can't tap into this very ancient wisdom and relationship to the earth. We need to recover that identity with the earth, all of us.
We
It's
do. And I think you say it so brilliantly at the end of the book, in the epilogue, you talk about, for me, as it is in heaven. And, when I think about that and I think about sort of what I grew up with is, especially with my stepmom's philosophy, what she believed is that we can create heaven every day right here. We have the ability. Heaven isn't this abstract vision of something that we may or may not ever accomplish or achieve or experience. And she
Mhm.
would talk to us girls, especially us girls, about The fact that every day we are on this planet, no matter what your life circumstance, we have
Hmm.
the right to choose energy. She never said the heaven. She never said the energy of heaven, but I now look back and I know that's what she meant.
Exactly, exactly. Joseph Campbell, that's beautiful that you had that teaching. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist who I quote in the stage called The Mountain, he used to say that eternity is not sometime, is not a very long time. Eternity is now and now and now. So it's really not a place that we need some time in the future that we need to arrive at. It's getting deeply into each and every moment. And we can have that heavenly feeling, that connection with life at any moment. Not even, it doesn't even have to be an especially joyous moment. You can be lost looking at a tree or a sunset or a cloud in any ordinary day and find yourself in that dimension of eternity for however long it lasts. And so partly what I'm saying with this book is let's go back there again and again and again every single day. Let's not let a day go by without a little bit of wonder shining upon us and transforming us. It's a place we can go to whenever we choose. It's
And
it's
that
not
is, Fabiana, that is a powerful message for our time. That the message you're bringing forth in the book, but also in your work and also when you're teaching, that is a powerful message of our time. And better than a lot of folks that message transcends age. It
Mhm.
transcends where our backgrounds are, where we're from. That is a universal message that we as human beings have the ability to bring into our lives every minute. You're just
Mhm.
reminding us and teaching us again, aren't you?
Of course, this is not something that I'm bringing into the world. This is something that is within all of our hearts, and we all need to find our personal way back into it. That's why I wanted to give an ample variety of paths. There are probably many more paths from the ones I said, but those are ones that have been very sacred for me and are still very valid and useful. And I'd just like to say that at this particular time when hope is sometimes seems to be lacking and there's so much fear and so much um, uncertainty still looming in our future, it's really an all hands on deck moment. And for that, we need to be very much alive. There's a quote that I like very much by Howard Thurman, which says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. What the world needs is people who have come alive. So
Yeah.
we all need to remember that. How do we get that spark back? What is it for you? Is it music? Is it relationships? Is it painting? Is it your work? Is it animals? Whatever it is for you, cultivate that relationship and make it help yourself come alive with it every day, because the challenges really are great, but we are up to the task. We just need to have all of our ancient wisdom and our what's the word, modern day prefrontal cortex also working for us, all of it, all of our
Yes.
aspects, our emotions, our thoughts, our knowledge, our wisdom. We need to put it all in line in order to create the new world that we need to create. But mostly we have to have a sense of hope and wonder in order to be able to summon the strength to bring ourselves to this task.
Yeah. There's no question about it because, without hope and wonder, we feel like an empty vessel. And
Mhm.
we're never meant to feel like an empty vessel. Thank you so much for today. One last question. How can people, again, get a copy of the book? Thank you for joining me here today. Thank you for writing a book that is not just for our time, but it's for our everyday life. Thank you so much. How do we find out how to get a copy of the book?
Thank you, Pat. Um, you can find it in Amazon or Book Depository, but mostly in Amazon, it's already ready for pre-order. It's coming out on February 12th. You can find me by Googling my name, fabianafondevila.com, or find me in Instagram or Facebook if you look for the tag Where Wonder Lives. So those are the two places. And finally, just to remind you that on Saturday, I'm having a workshop called Activating Wonder, in which we're going to be going through some very specific practices for getting back in touch with this vital force that we've been talking about. Thank you so much, Pat. It's been wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for bringing a beautiful, beautiful gift for all of us to remember the truth of who we are. Thank you, Fabiana. I want to thank Benny for pushing all the right buttons. Thank you, Jacob, for putting those beautiful images and references on Facebook for everyone. And Fabiana, thank you for taking a powerful message into the world. And your work is not done. You know, there's much more on the table for you. Thank you so much for being you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
All right, let's take a short break. We're not done yet. We're just warming up. We'll be right back.